Several alternative sweeteners had been studied, and they all showed cognitive decline except for Tagatose. And Tagatose was the one that did not show cognitive decline in the people that had been studied. I found out about that study because I woke up one day early September and all of a sudden our Amazon sales had uh, almost gone up by 10 times. It's not just that Tagatose does not have the negatives of sugar, it actually has positive health benefits like fiber. Yeah, it's not too good to be true, but it's pretty good.
And thank you so much for joining us on an episode of Money in the Bank with Frank. I've been a big fan, big believer. Obviously, I saw you guys and was introduced to you through the fundraising process in the early phases, and everything about it just shined of what if you get past the disbelief, this is what we were talking about as kids: healthy sugar, healthy candy, right? So it it um it amazes me that it hasn't been adopted more mainstream, and so I appreciate your time. I see that you've been traveling around the world, getting accolades in different places, but, so far, not so much here.
Right. We do have a headwind in the form of the United States Food and Drug Administration on a labeling issue, and if we have time, we can get into details on that. But that is definitely an impediment, and a frustrating one. But I'm looking forward to telling you about Tagatose, telling your listeners about Tagatose, um, and yeah, it's not too good to be true, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's great, and just for the record, I have it, and I've used it, and I like it. Use it in coffee, I use it in everything. I'm not a baker. I hear that it's got a little bit of a lower baking temperature, but it actually has that browning effect, so that's amazing.
Yes, so it does brown. You can bake with it. It'll brown at lower temperatures than traditional sugar, but that's not necessarily a problem. It's just something to be aware of. By the way, that's our B2C jar. We have updated labels, so that may be a collector's item. So hold on to that. Um, Hopefully, there's more value to the company than just a collector's item of a old B2C jar. But we have new labels up on Amazon, and for probably put those up there about 3 months ago.
That's great, that's great. So tell us a little bit about give me your testimony. Tell us how you got here, how you were able to, come up with this novel rare sugar process. I mean, it's not that this is a new thing. It exists in nature, right? But it is a rare sugar, which means that it's got better properties.
Yes. So now I know you're in Texas and you said the term, give me your testimony. And I used to live in Alabama. I lived there for about 20 years. So, that would mean telling you how I came to Christ. I'm assuming,
You're the first person to catch me on that
yeah,
one.
I'm assuming that's not what you mean. Um, w- uh, so I'll tell you the healthy sugar, the miracle sugar testimony. Um, yeah, Tagatose has been around. Let me tell you what Tagatose is, and I know we're gonna, it's money in the bank with Frank. So I know we'll talk about some areas in which this is relevant to money, not just the money of buying and selling Tagatose. But Tagatose is a sweet plant material. So it was, hey, as far as testimony is concerned, it was invented by God. It wasn't invented by me. It's been around for about 30 years. It can be made via multiple processes, but those are pretty expensive. So my co-founder, whose name is Dr. Dan Wichelecki, invented a process for using uh, enzymes in a very unique way to be able to make tagatose from commodity feedstocks, starch, from corn, potato, wheat. We use non-GM, but it could be other types of starch from whatever botanical source you can think of. And this allows tagatose to be made at large scale, at better costs, and in a way that's scalable globally. Um, Now, so what? What's so great about tagatose? Well, it does. tastes very, very much like regular sugar. Now, every single alternative ever invented says the same thing, so tasting is believing, but it's about 92% as sweet as regular sugar. It is, it looks like regular sugar, it flows like regular sugar, measures like regular sugar. It's got the bulking properties that some other sugar alternatives lack. It doesn't have any weird aftertaste, at least not that I've ever noticed. It is functional in food production, so that means, baking at home, as well as using in a food production environment, for candy bars, ice cream, etc. And then it's got a variety of health properties. There's a reason why you've heard less about tagatose than you have about allulose, and we can get into that. That gets into the labeling, um, but and a few other things. But on a health perspective, tagatose is low glycemic, so it's not going to spike blood sugar levels. It's not going to increase insulin. It's safe for teeth. Doesn't cause cavities. It actually is good for teeth. It is low calorie. It's about 62% lower calorie than sugar. It does have some calories, and that's because of the way that it acts in the gut as a prebiotic, like a fiber. And so what tagatose is doing is it's actually feeding the beneficial bacteria in your gut. So this is one of the positive health properties. So it's beyond tagatose just not it's not just that tagatose does not have the negatives of sugar, it actually has positive health benefits like fiber. And I can get into some more of that. It actually helps moderate blood sugar levels. It's got antioxidant properties. It helps remineralize teeth. It helps the oral microbiome. So all these positive health benefits. But again, it's been high cost. Um, our process can bring that cost down in a way that is mass market affordable and scalable globally. The problem has been labeling, and the labeling is that I'll just give a little preview. The FDA is currently forcing tagatose to be counted as added sugars on the nutrition facts panel. It exempted allulose a few years ago uh, under the criteria that it announced in exempting allulose. Tagatose should have been exempted, but they reached the opposite decision. It was under a different administration. Maybe that had something to do with it. Um, we've actually taken that to federal court and won, but are still waiting for the FDA to kind of catch up with the court system and catch up with, frankly, reality on what tagatose is. And once that logjam is gone, then I think that you'll see a lot of really good things happening in the United States.
The things that I thought was fascinating about Bonumose in general was that when I first started looking at it, the first thing I like to do is say, like, why would I say no? Get me to a no as fast as possible. And, okay, you know what? The sugar lobby is going to kill this. There's no way the sugar lobby is going to let this happen.
Mhm.
Well, turns out that ASR is kind of like one of your biggest proponents, right?
Right.
Like some of the other investors on file, I believe you can mention some of the names, but it doesn't seem to be a problem with the food industry. They actually are looking for healthier alternatives all the time, and again, the labeling seems to be, or tell me how or why is the labeling an issue at this?
Sure. So, I mean, you're right about ASR. ASR Group is American Sugar Refining. They're the largest cane sugar refiner and marketer in the world. I think I have that right. They're the parent company of Domino Sugar. On the West Coast, CNH Sugar is their well-known brand. And, they're one of our strategic investors. Uh, I would never mention an investor's name, but for the fact that some have been in the press. And so Hershey Company is also an investor, Simrise, a global flavor house, and a few others that are strategic. So, um, uh, and I think that says a lot about how much tagatose is similar to sugar in its sensory properties, and they're willing to put their reputation behind it. And they're our distribution partner for certain geographies, for key geographies, including the United States. Um, the problem with the labeling is that, if something shows up in the nutrition facts panel as added sugars, that's going to cause a lot of people to put the product back on the shelf. It causes confusion, and it's really misleading for tagatose to be counted as sugar because again, it does none of the things that that are associated with regular sugar in terms of health, and yet it has all these positive health benefits of dietary fiber. So, um, the problem for food companies is they have limited space on the label to explain what tagatose is. They know that consumers have limited time to make decisions when they're in a grocery store. People are busy. Um, and so it just causes these food companies to say, well, let's just wait and see. Let's see if the FDA changes the label. We can always use something else that is not as confusing to consumers and something that is able to be labeled appropriately. And so it definitely hurts us in the United States. It hurts anybody else that wants to try to make tagatose less expensively than us, even though we think that that's not likely. We think our process is likely to be the winner. Um, what is interesting that in places like South America, where they have changed the labeling and it's tagatose is counted as either a low glycemic sugar or a non-traditional sweetener, something like that, then sales have really taken off. So hopefully that will come to the United States in a way that benefits food innovators as well as consumers.
What's interesting to me about, and going into it again just a little further, and for the show notes, I definitely want to maybe put some links to the court case, which shows that they theoretically are supposed to promptly make some changes. But with the new administration, I mean, I know that there's been tremendous press on what Robert Kennedy is doing, and what he's trying to do, making people healthier and better. And I know that Dr. Marty Macri is a big fan of
The
blind spots
microbiome,
in the process, right? With
yeah.
his book specifically. I'm surprised that they haven't, and maybe they just don't know. Maybe it hasn't gotten into their ear, and hopefully they'll hear more about.
Yeah. Well, I do want to dive deeper into the health and wellness um, attributes of tagatose, and how that's a financial issue as well. But with respect to that comment you just made, I mean, we are having some discussions out of respect for the individuals with whom we're speaking. I, don't want to name names or, name dates or say exactly what was said. We do think that they are paying attention in a way that is vastly different from the prior administration. And I don't want to make this political, but I can give you an example. A very senior person in the FDA on the human food side under the prior administration, I approached him at a conference. We had not met before, but I approached him at a conference, introduced myself, and he literally stuck his hand up and said, I'm not talking to you. I'm not talking to you. Um, and his counterpart in the new administration, when I met him for the first time, he said, "Hey, sit down, let's talk." So vast difference. And I mean, listen, people beat up on sugar. RFK has said sugar is poison. Um, Others say sugar is the new tobacco. It seems like the weight of the government and healthcare leaders are against sugar. And in that world, it's just untenable for tagatose to be counted as sugar. It just doesn't make any sense. But sugar's also pretty great. So let's give sugar its due. And the when it comes to replacing sugar, it's really difficult to do that. And some of the things that are used to replace sugar have health issues of their own, or at least have been implicated as potentially having health issues by some observers in some studies. For example, sugar alcohols. There are certain sugar alcohols, erythritol, xylitol, sorbitol, that have been linked to cardiac issues. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's from the Cleveland Clinic, and they're pretty smart, um, and despite being Yankees, and then artificial sweeteners, aspartame, ACE-K, sucralose, they've been linked to oxidative stress, like the you know oxidative stress, which leads to all sorts of other conditions, including autism, by the way. Uh, and there was an interesting paper that came out in early September from Brazil, where several alternative sweeteners had been studied, and they all showed cognitive decline except for Tagatose. And Tagatose was the one that did not show cognitive decline in the people that had been studied. I found out about that study because I woke up one day early September and all of a sudden our Amazon sales had like uh, almost gone up by 10 times overnight. And that kept that way through the rest of September and have still been higher than before. So um, I think consumers are starting to become aware. And then I can go into, some of the cost of various diet related diseases if you'd like me to.
I definitely want to get to that. I think that one of the things that I want to bring the attention to is that like there's only certain amount of bandwidth that individuals as a whole have in doing anything, right? Like you go to the grocery store, you're going to get sugar. You get what you get. If you're, if you happen to be somebody who's really health conscious, maybe you've done your research and you'll see something like this and you'll figure it out. And by the way, here it is, right? I mean,
Yep.
it literally looks and feels and acts like sugar. Um, But on the corporate side, the commercial side,
Hmm.
the people that are using allulose and the people that do understand, like the brands out there that are selling prebiotic bars that require some type of sugar, are they also not interested in it because they have to like there's so much stuff in their stuff. Do they have to do added sugar because of your added sugar labeling, or do you have any additional corporate customers that may be, B2B that are adopting it more, like you mentioned some of the previous, comments
Yeah.
or the previous companies.
So, most sugar is sold already in food. So as a producer of a sugar alternative, B2B is the place to be. Yes, we sell it through Amazon just to give consumers an option to buy it, but the largest volume will be through B2B to food companies. The problem is that in the United States, because of the um, unusual definition, or let's just say outdated definition that the FDA uses to define sugar, Tagatose is counted as sugar, and our experience has been, and when I say our, I'm also talking about our partners, American Sugar Refining. The experience is, the feedback from the food companies is that's just really challenging to overcome. People are inundated with sugar is poison, sugar is bad. And if something shows up on the nutrition facts panel counted as sugar grams, even if it says something else on the ingredient list, but if it's counted as sugar grams, that's just too much for us to overcome, no matter how many great health claims can be made about Tagatose. And there are a lot that can be made, prebiotic being probably the most important. So until that labeling is changed, food companies are taking the approach of, you know what, we're aware of Tagatose, we know how well it works, but there are other options where we do not have this challenge. Erythritol, for example, a sugar alcohol, it does not have to be counted as sugar. Um, it tastes okay. It's got some functionality issues, but you know, overcoming that sugar scarlet letter is just too much of a challenge for food companies to undertake.
I was actually thinking along those, along some lines of, are there any research studies? And I know that, as a company, you have to run lean and there's like legitimate resource issues when it comes to like what you're going to tackle and what you're going to attack and how you're going to fund it. Are there any potential grants? Are there any potential opportunities or any potential strategic partners that would be willing to do some type of a study? Any medical institutions or anyone that you're working with that is showing data? Because I know data is a big issue.
Yeah. So um, there is a lot, because Tagatose has been around for around 30 years. There is a lot of research that has been done on Tagatose. More should be done, more and deeper. But we have a bibliography which I will share with you, and you can put in the show notes, which is lists all the different studies, and there's almost 100 of them. So there's a lot out there already. So everything I said about prebiotic, low glycemic, all that, it's all backed up by studies. Um, and those are not funded by us. Those are just been done. In fact, most of them were done before we even came into existence. They were done when Tagatose was around from other methods. Um, we have partially funded one study, which is wrapping up this probably the end of the year. It's regarding um, basically just more information about how Tagatose is processed in the body. The Brazilian paper that I mentioned, we had nothing to do about it, nothing to do with it. I didn't even know about it until I, found out that our sales were going up, and was like, I need to find out why our sales are going up. Um, a problem with us fund well, the practical problem with us funding it is, as you mentioned, we have limited resources. But the problem with food companies funding these studies is the question that has been raised by Secretary Kennedy and others. Um, can you trust the research? Um, can you trust the results if XYZ company funds something that helps XYZ company? Um, so we've been working with some ideas about, is there a way to encourage the federal government to provide funding for open research on what we're calling rare sugar therapeutics? So these things like Tagatose, allulose, and others that actually have therapeutic benefits, and encouraging the federal government through the NIH's new focus on nutrition to fund open research. And when I say open research, I mean the results are open to everybody, they're replicable, and the IP is available to everybody. The IP on how to utilize Tagatose for its, or the others, for its therapeutic benefits. Um, but having Bonumose fund it all, impossible, and maybe not even desirable. And then so far we've relied primarily on what's already out there.
I'm trying to find it on my phone. I was recently at a healthcare conference, and it talked about the drugs that are out there and the chronic conditions. The top 3 chronic conditions in the world right now are inflammation, weight loss, and diabetes. So the
Yeah,
top 3.
yeah.
What do you do for those 3?
Well, okay, so let's talk about that. I mean, just in the United States, the cost to treat diabetes is about $300 billion a year. And if you want to add in treating prediabetes, that's another $40 billion a year. Obesity is, and oftentimes they're talked about in the same um, breath, but they're not, they're different conditions. That's $260 billion a year. And then sugar and alternative sweeteners have been linked to cardiovascular disease. That's another $400 billion a year. So that's $1 trillion of diet-related diseases that are linked with just those. Um, these conditions of cardiovascular disease and other things are often inflammatory related. Um, it's an interesting point that has been made by many others, that the spending on diet-related diseases exceeds the amount of money that the United States spends on food. Um, that's, food should nourish. Unfortunately, food is not nourishing. So what does Tagatose do? Okay, now this is where this is where it gets really exciting, I think. So Tagatose for gut health. It's not just, oh, your gut feels better. Tagatose is very effective at producing butyrate. Butyrate is a type of short chain fatty acid, and you can look at, go to Perplexity, ChatGPT, Grok, all these things. Ask how Tagatose does when it comes to producing butyrate, and how that relates to, or compares to other things that produce butyrate. Tagatose really does well. Butyrate is directly related to the production of glutathione. Glutathione helps reduce oxidative stress. It helps detoxify the body. So Tagatose has this indirect method of reducing oxidative stress. In addition, Tagatose has a more direct method. It's an antioxidant. It's an anti-inflammatory. So it reduces the problems that are caused by other food consumption or environmental toxins. Of course, it's low glycemic, so it's not going to cause you problems with diabetes, and it actually helps moderate blood sugar levels. One of the ways it does that is that Tagatose inhibits the enzyme that breaks down sucrose in the bloodstream. So it's going to help you not absorb as much sucrose. Um, it's fantastic for dental health. Um, and then there's this thing you might have heard of. I just heard of it a couple weeks ago called Ozempic mouth. You know, these people that take these GLP-1 drugs, and apparently it dries out your mouth and it leads to problems with teeth and gums. Well, Tagatose is good for the oral microbiome. It benefits the bacteria there. It helps break up plaque. It helps remineralize teeth, and so Tagatose is a potential therapeutic for that condition. Um, and then I'll mention one others. I'm not sure if this was in your list, but like cholesterol. Now, you know, paint me as skeptic. I'm not really sure cholesterol is as bad as some people say it is, but um, I've got somewhat elevated cholesterol personally. I do. Um, I measured it. I've been doing this function health thing that a lot of people have done where you go and you get all these different biomarkers. And did that back in January. And I just recently did it again. The one change that I made in my diet, because I eat pretty healthy and I'm pretty fit, the one change I made in my diet is I increased my Tagatose consumption from January through October. We're in October now when we're having this by a pretty good amount. So I'm probably having up about 3 tablespoons a day throughout the day, which is ends up being more than the daily recommended allowance of fiber, but it's, I do that. My LDL dropped by 25% in the course of that 9 months, and it's the only dietary change that I made. By the way, I think it's good for dogs too. I think your dog's in the background. Was that your dog in the background?
Yeah, so I've got my dog in the background here, Messy. She's not a soccer player, but she's named for one.
Oh, all right. Quick other story, and you can cut all this nonsense out. It's not a Texas A&M story, but I was visiting in Argentina a few years ago for a potential production partner down there, and what do I don't know anything about soccer, or as they call it, football, and I saw this guy's picture it was, by the way, during the World Cup, and this guy's picture was everywhere, and I finally had to ask my host, who is that guy?" And they're like, that's Lionel Messi. I mean, he's like the most famous athlete in the world. Who are you?" And I happened to be in Buenos Aires when they won the semifinal of the World Cup. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, here's my aside on that. My wife is an avid soccer fan, like
Mhm.
just a huge fan of soccer, and so when I found out that we're gonna have World Cup games here in Dallas, I was like, "I put me on the list, coach. I want tickets." Have
Nice.
you seen the prices of those tickets?
I have not, but
Wow. We're not going to those games unless I can find a way.
well, yeah, yeah. Well, that would be pretty cool to see. But seriously, dogs do suffer from hyperglycemia, um, and dogs need prebiotics too. So we
Mhm.
think there's probably an opportunity with cats and dogs and other pets for Tagatose, as well as some of the other things that we can make. Um, and here I'll go a little bit more like, what can Tagatose do? So
And before
yeah,
you get
sure.
to that, one of the things that I have a difficulty, it's kind of hard when you can't explain yourself, it makes it really difficult to sell yourself. And I have a hard time saying sugar, right? Bonumose is a sugar. It's a
Mm-hmm.
rare sugar, but it's not really sugar, right? So is it a fiber? How do we define this but still have people understand what we're talking about?
Yeah, it's a good question. So here, I'll talk around it and maybe provide some solutions. Oftentimes, I will say sweet plant material because that's what it occurs in small amounts in apples, pineapples, and some grains, but too small to harvest. So it is in nature. It's a natural um, plant material, but you can't harvest it. And so to be made commercially, it has to be made from something else. In the past, it's been made from milk, sugar, lactose, and we have a way of making it from starch, which is more abundant, and our process is more streamlined. But yeah, yes, technically, Tagatose is a monosaccharide, which means it's a single monomer of a saccharide. Sucrose is a disaccharide. It's got two monosaccharides linked together. One of those is fructose, one of those is glucose. Um, so technically, Tagatose is a saccharide, a monosaccharide, but I mean, do you ever go to the store and look for something based upon whether or not it's a monosaccharide, a disaccharide, or a trisaccharide? Most people don't really know what those terms are. Um, in the one sense, as a from a chemical definition, Tagatose is sugar. From a health perspective, it's not sugar at all. It's more like fiber. From a how does it taste perspective, well, then you're back to be like, oh, that's it's kind of a lot like sugar. Um, Tagatose, in my opinion, ought to be classified under if it's going to be classified as anything, it ought to be classified as fiber because that's how the body treats it. The body treats Tagatose as soluble fiber. The FDA, those their rules don't allow for that. Um, Maybe they will adopt some classification that is rare sugar or beneficial sugar or healthy sugar in the similar way that certain fats have become known as, okay, those are healthier fats. Um, but it is a challenge. What is Tagatose? I can tell you it is not something that gives you diabetes or obesity or tooth decay or gut health problems or cardiovascular disease. But it is something that retains the joy of eating.
And that's it in a nutshell, right? Like, if you take a look at history, we started salt, sugar, make it taste better, right? You had sauces in France because the rancid meat, you had to disguise the taste, you know? We who likes to eat crackers by themselves?
W Well, also the preservative nature too. So, Tagatose has the same ability to reduce microbial contamination in foods the way that sugar does. So, like if you look at the Middle East, that's sugar was the preservative, and now there's a big issue with overconsumption of sugar in the Middle East. But you've hit on something that I think is really interesting, is that people have a natural, for whatever reason, a desire for sweet things. Um, it is people want it, whether it's evolutionary or just because it's great and people need joy in their life. People want sweet things. Tagatose is enjoyable to eat. Tagatose is also beneficial to eat. Um, But here's what's really interesting is that there are many healthy food ingredients out there. How many of them taste good? How many of them are something you want to eat? Um, how many of them would you find yourself going over to the counter and eating a spoonful of it while your wife looks at you like, why are you eating, just spoonfuls of Tagatose? So Tagatose can actually make other healthy food ingredients taste better. Tagatose can make people want to eat foods that have been reformulated in a way where they're healthier, better food colorings, no preservatives, protein, all those other things. So what this allows Tagatose to do is it's like a vector. It it uses the innate desire for sweetness to get healthy food into people instead of expecting them to overcome their desire for sweetness. And you know, all of us who know that sugar maybe should be reduced still have a difficult time overcoming the desire for sweetness, and I'm the chief among sinners when it comes to that. So it is a really interesting molecule.
Can you tell me, you mentioned it a little while back. Tell me about when we were talking about production and scale, where is it currently? How is it manufactured? Where is it being manufactured? How did you guys
Yeah, yeah. So here's a way that Tagatose uh, can be can make an impact upon the U.S. economy um, in a way that maybe other food ingredients cannot. So we make it currently here in Charlottesville, Virginia. So the Tagatose that was in that jar and the Tagatose that's in the jars on Amazon now and the Tagatose that's being sent to South America, made here in Charlottesville, Virginia. Um, it's made using a system that looks a lot like how other food ingredients are made. It's just that we're making something healthy as opposed to something that is unhealthy. It's a very clean facility. I mean, we love showing it off. Um, we make it from starch. So starch comes from corn, it comes from wheat, it comes from potatoes, it comes from multiple other things. Um, some people say, well, oh, well, corn's all not, it's genetically modified. We use non-GM starch. So, there's nothing about the non-GM-ness that makes it work better. It's just that that's what we have chosen to use. Now, high fructose corn syrup is declining in usage, and that means, well, where is that corn going? We actually provide an off ramp. Tagatose provides an off ramp for that corn. So Tagatose is made with the crops that are produced by American farmers. So one of the points that we have been making to the administration is this is good for American farmers. It's good for American agriculture to have Tagatose in the food supply. And because, one step further, because it's such a drop in for regular sugar when it comes to the food production environment, that retooling is not required. So, so far I've talked about how Tagatose is made. That was your question. But when it comes to using Tagatose, so how is food made? You do not have to retool your food production environment because Tagatose works like regular sugar does in that setting. That's what makes it scalable. So we think good for American farmers, good for the American economy.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point because the farmers rely upon being able to use that stock for something, right? Like,
Right.
I could go on for hours about the agricultural system and how it also is challenged, but, we'll leave that for a
Yeah.
different segment.
So you mentioned, Frank, that wouldn't sugar be against Bonumose? Well, the sugar companies have, from what we can tell, are not against Bonumose, and I really can't say enough nice things about American sugar refining. They are top notch people and have been incredibly helpful to us in many different ways. And they're human beings that want to make the world a better place too. Um, well, what about corn? Would the corn sweetener folks be against Bonumose, against Tagatose? I would think that they should not be because we are Tagatose is good for corn refiners. Similar equipment can be used. Um, Tagatose is good for corn growers. Um, so we think that this is a unique thing where good for health, and good for farmers and good for the economy.
Appreciate that. As far as the cost goes, how much different is like, let's say that everyone decided that Bonumose is the way to go. Is there a significant change in the cost of like, once you scale up, is there a cost difference between what sucrose would be versus what the Tagatose would cost?
There would be a cost. There would be a cost difference. Keep in mind that sugar is made at roughly 180 million metric tons per year. So it's such a massive scale. So sugar and then high fructose corn syrup have massive economies of scale. Um, if Tagatose were made at the same scale as high fructose corn syrup, um, arguably the cost structure would not be that different. Um, in some ways, Tagatose is more efficient than making high fructose corn syrup because of the way that my co-founder Dan Wichelecki um, combines the enzymes, and so that's pretty interesting. But in terms of specific prices, I'd rather, out of respect for our distribution partners, not get into specific pricing.
I was just thinking, like, in a perfect world, ceteris paribus, under the assumption that everybody ate the way that they normally do and people used Bonumose or Tagatose instead of sucrose in many commercial foods, health benefits, cost would probably
Yeah.
outweigh it would probably be, you know, observably cheaper over the long term
Oh,
for the food, for the calories that we're producing and the health benefits may,
yeah.
all things again being equal, probably be healthier.
Okay, so first of all, you using words like Ceteris paribus. I mean, I thought if you had asked me what that was, I'd say it's the three-headed dog. So I know that's not right, but I'm gonna try to answer the question anyway. Um, one of the food companies said, in one of their main products, the amount of Tagatose, the Tagatose you would use in their main product would probably add a penny or two to the final cost of the product. So, it does not raise the price. in any meaningful way. But even with the incremental addition of that price, there would be savings on the cost of healthcare. Um, I mean, we did a back of the envelope calculation that um, if Tagatose were adopted at 25% sugar reduction, so reduce sugar and high fructose corn syrup by 25% and use Tagatose instead, which is, by the way, plausible for Tagatose. It may not be for some other alternatives, but it is plausible for Tagatose. It would reduce, it would prevent tens of millions of chronic disease cases. It would remove tens of billions of unnecessary calories from the US diet. And over 10 years, it would save between $1 and $2 trillion. So even if you have incremental spending higher than the baseline when you start using Tagatose instead of sucrose, and that's not a given, but let's just say it is, um, you got to remember that the overall cost of ownership, the overall cost comes down. And then another thing you can't put a price on, but think of the suffering that comes along with diet-related diseases, and think about the increased productivity when people are, freed, when the shackles of this, of diet-related disease problems, when those, when that is relieved, when that is taken off of their shoulders, how much more productive those people can be.
I just go back to purpose and things that are actually positive for mankind as a whole. And, I happen to be lucky enough to to be able to afford to eat a healthy diet. There's a lot of people in the nation that don't have that luxury, that are kind of forced to eat the cheapest foods just so that they can get those cheap calories in their bodies. What are your thoughts on how Tagatose or Bonumose could help on?
Yeah, that's why we started the company. I mean, we started the company for many. I mean, chief among the reasons why we started the company was to alleviate suffering. And you don't just alleviate suffering for the Franks and Eds of the world. You have to alleviate suffering for the least among us. So making Tagatose through Dan's method, through the process that Bonumose has patented and is improving every day, will allow Tagatose to be affordable for the mass market, certainly the US mass market, and then, ultimately the global mass market. Now, it's not there today, and we're selling it on Amazon for a price that's pretty good compared to other sugar alternatives, but a lot higher than where I want it to be. Um, and but Tagatose, because we can drive down the cost, and because you're not having to sacrifice taste and texture and other things that make food delightful, it allows for a much broader range of uses. And it's something, there are going to be consumers who, when they go to the store, they just want something that is inexpensive and tastes good. And Tagatose can provide both of those things.
Let me ask you a question, and this is going towards the fact that we're actually your plant is made your plant's in Virginia, it's in the United States.
Yep.
So you are talking a lot about like the South American market or international market because they're the ones that actually have um, maybe appropriate uh, marketing materials or other. How are you being impacted from the reverse tariffs, if you will, or by the potential tariff
Yeah.
war? How are you being impacted?
So, you know, right now it's not really impacting us that much because our volumes are low, and it is affecting our decision about I would say our conversations regarding and our thought process regarding where the next plant where the bigger plant should be. When's the next scale up, the scale that's really going to start once the Tagatose labeling changes. Um, it's a bit of a chicken or the eggs. The food companies that want to have Tagatose, they also want to have Tagatose in sufficient supply so they don't run out. Um, and so we have great um, investors and partners in other countries. Um, and so maybe that ends up being where we have to go if the U.S. market continues to be closed in large respects because of the labeling. Then that would shift us more toward other countries in terms of production. But I know that we will that's going to get changed eventually. I think sooner rather than later, and U.S. production I think will be uh, part of what we're doing, and it will be a large part of what we're doing. And I think tariffs are going to be helpful to us, just like they are to other, American producers of goods and well, uh, goods. So that was a word salad, I think, but somewhere in there you can maybe extract a coherent response.
I just think that for everything that we're trying to do as a nation, trying to re-onshore some of our, critical supplies, and it would be a shame that something that actually started here, created here, plants that are already here, would have to go offshore
Oh,
because that's where the market is.
yeah.
That would be sad.
This invention it's a U.S. innovation. Dan Wichelecki is the inventor of this. Um, China filed a copycat patent application, almost verbatim what our patent application was, um, early on in our company's history. And long story about how they got a copy of our then unpublished patent application, claimed it as their own. They had been flooding the zone in academic journals, scientific journals, gaslighting, saying that they invented the Tagatose method that Dan Wichelecki invented. Um, and this is all being done, led by the Chinese Academy of Sciences, which is, I guess, their equivalent of something like the NIH plus the university system. So there are Chinese universities, more than one, that are claiming to have invented what Dan Wichelecki invented and what Bonumose owns. And by the way, Dan's still our chief scientific officer. Um, we actually won a lawsuit over this against a Chinese-owned company here in the United States that was a proxy for the communist government. Um, China also is the dominant supplier of artificial sweeteners, which lead to health problems. The dominant supplier of sugar alcohols, which maybe lead to health problems. Those things weaken American health. That's not good for the United States. Um, China is creating a need to spend money on drugs that weakens our economy. China produces most of the APIs and the drug precursors and a lot of the drugs that are used to treat diet-related diseases. So, if the U.S. government continues to create a problem for us with this labeling, I mean, it's not impossible that Tagatose will end up being produced in China and then have to be imported from China, which is bad all around.
Wow. Well, we can't thank you so much, Ed, for joining. We will definitely have you back with some follow-up questions. I'd love for you to submit some more of those documents, like some of the studies would be great. Love to put those up on the show notes.
Yep, I'll send all that stuff to you to put in the show notes, whatever you want.
Great. Well, good luck, best of luck, and I look forward to try to continue to promote your company.
All right, thanks, Frank. Appreciate it. Enjoy the conversation.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.